for his daughter again, so I don't anticipate his being here today. So we'll call the meeting, the Planning and Development Committee to order. We got a couple, 3, 4 different pieces of business that we want to talk about. One will be what was Project A and Majestic Steel. Another will be the National Cold War Museum that we talked a little bit about. And then Cliff has a couple other projects that he wants to kind of broach with us just a little bit. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cliff Chetwood.
Thank you. The last time I was here, of course, the committee did vote on an incentive for Majestic Steel, which has since been publicly announced. I understand there's some concerns about tying up that much money this far in advance, and I have no particular dispute with that. I mean, I would like to, at a minimum, ask for the $300,000 that was going to be used on the screen hire training program, because that will come in first, and that will actually go on next year. A little bit about how that incentive came to pass, or came to be what we offered. That is what we had been instructed to offer for the past 10 years, was to come up with a figure of what the project should be worth to the county for Mississippi County hire, make half that available if it was a retail hire, and offer that on a performance-based incentive where they actually have to perform before we grant them the incentive, which we then do in the form of reimbursement for capital expenditure that they have already undertaken, either land, building, machinery. So the Great River Board felt like that was our policy instructions that had been set by the court, and the court was who sets policy for economic development. There are some things that, I had open talks with the attorney who represented them and also represents Nucor and all manners incentive, and there's a possibility that the court would like that we could present an incentive package that would grant less money, but grant it up front, where they could use it actually in the performance of their initial investment, along with the screen hire training program. And then even possibly with the housing incentive that I've discussed with most of everyone here.
So reiterate again, refresh us on what we had intended to offer to begin with.
It was
Majestic.
Well, the original thing was 2.4 million, minus 300,000 that was done in the screen hire training.
I thought it was 2.7.
I thought it was
Well, it was
2.7.
Well, it was, but then y'all voted at the meeting to just do 2.4, which would include the 4. And I think that would be more than that.
That's not the way I remembered it to be.
And that's not the way we had it on the agenda either.
Okay.
We had 300,000 as a separate appropriation for ANC,
Okay.
and then we had 2.4 as an
Okay.
appropriation for the incentive program.
Okay.
So they were still, total was still 2.7.
Okay.
Right, that's how I,
And we didn't cut it back then.
Okay.
But on the 2.4 was on the basis of,
$10,000 per, I believe you said.
Well, it was 1,200 for 200,
12,000,
12,000 for 254 jobs.
no, it wasn't that much.
2.7.
Yeah. No, 217.
15,000 per job. 15.
Was it 15?
The church would not sell it times 15.
That's right, yeah.
No, it's 2.3.
I think I did 15.
I really thought it was 12,000, and I was almost positive that there was more jobs there.
No, it was 250, I think it was 225 jobs, I think that's what was
Okay.
There we go, it's at 12,000 times 225.
Okay, I was thinking it was 12, okay.
yep, that's it.
12,000 times 225.
Right.
Yeah, that's where I got the number.
And of course, they won't be that, it won't be that sum, because you know, a significant portion will be detail hires. And then some will be, this is.
The question has been brought up to me since it's come out, and when we first talking about it, it was still just Project A, and we really didn't know anything about it. It was that, the question is brought up now, is that 225 jobs a realistic number based on that particular company's portfolio and how many total
Right,
facilities they have and how many total jobs they have?
right. Well, I think it is, but, you know, all we could take was what they stated, and Nucor backed up, that this will be a super distribution center. So they will be employing roughly 3 times what normal distribution centers, which would be like JMS or Ratner and Arkansas Steel Processing and Osceola, currently employed, which is between 60 and 75 people in each location. There are a lot of people in this city county employed in this business of slitting, cutting, pickling steel. You know, even users as large as John Deere and Caterpillar, they don't buy direct from a steel company. They buy through a distributed company.
How do they compare to CalStrip, this, Majestic Steel?
Well, one, their pay scale is $25 is what they would be paying their online people. And that's what they thought they were gonna be paying before. We've had, obviously, wage pressure. It's gonna push all wages up. Whereas CalStrip is, CalStrip started off low. They said they were going in at 12 to 14. They didn't go in at that. They went in at 10. They've got about 20 people. They were only ever going to 40. They're gonna have to do something. I've met with them and, you know, they'll get there. It's just some people, the learning curve is difficult than with others.
What about the work they perform?
It's similar, but it's on a much lighter end basis.
CalStrip is?
Yes.
What about the other places that you just referenced, JMS and those other places, are they direct competitors, or are they?
Yeah, they're all competitors, you know, just like Nucor and Big River. You know.
Well, that's what Nucor likes. That's the reason they buy extra land and everything. They want their customers close to them.
Right.
And, you know, you take 4 or 5 plants employing 50 or 60 people, and some of them are less than that, and some of them are more than that. But they like their customers close to them. And it's to their advantage for all the shipping and all this and all that.
Right.
And their wages would be more in line with like Arkansas Steel Processing, which is also a high-end distributor. I know they happen to be the company that supplies John Deere with the steel that comes from Mississippi.
So Majestic is gonna be on the Nucor campus,
Yes.
basically on Nucor owned ground, so that's just what Justice Bird was saying, they're putting them close.
Right.
I think they have hopes and plans of filling all of that area.
They do.
You know, 40, 50, 60 jobs per plant, if they can do it.
So did this Majestic Steel, because the job numbers for what you can look online and see at the different plants that they have in the country, how many they employ. Based on those numbers, do they expect this to be 3 times larger than anything that they currently own as well?
They expect it,
Okay.
you know, but now,
Right, I mean, I'm just trying to
Right.
figure, I'm trying to equate, if they've got 60 and 70 people at all these other locations across, like they right now have like 300 and something employees from all 5 of their locations. So I'm
That's
just
right.
trying to justify where the
Right.
225 jobs are coming from.
well, and that's, you know, that is one of the advantages we have with performance-based incentives. You know, I mean, with a performance-based incentive, they have to show the workers, their address, and how many of them. And if they get up to say, if we have incentivized 50 jobs, and let's say after a year, they're at 75 jobs. Then the next year, they're down at 50. And the next year, they say, well, we've hired 25 more. they don't get those incentivized, because now they're just back up to 75. I mean, we keep a running total.
Right, that's just part of my concern about encumbering the entire 2.4 million now, if I don't think they're ever gonna get to that
Right.
number.
Well, you know, as long as there's no question we're handicapping ourselves in a way by tying up so much funding that we all know as reasonable people it's not going to be accessed. I mean, because,
We're
I
not
mean,
gonna
this
find
is
that
enough,
incentive
if
jobs.
everybody was hired in Mississippi County, and that far north, that close to the county line, I mean, probably half of them will come from the Boothie. So, you know, it's not for me to tell the court how to keep charge of its bookkeeping, you know, but we could do a figure, and then when we make yearly reports, we could track that figure. And obviously, at the end of the first year, if they're 150, then we should go ahead and
Agreed.
allocate the rest of it. But if
Do we have a time frame on this? Have we
well, they
put
won't
any
start
time-
production until January of
23,
23.
so they won't draw any of the incentive money
No.
until they start hiring.
Well, actually, we wouldn't start hiring, they wouldn't earn any until 25.
But they wouldn't start construction unless we guarantee the incentives.
Well, that was all part of them deciding to come here as opposed to another place that had a report.
Well, you know, we go through from time to time too. We've done it once or twice, I know, where we have, I guess you call it purge the books,
That's right.
where you have companies where we have set the money aside, but the time has passed and they haven't used it. So we go at that and it's no longer.
We've done it a couple times, we had to put it back.
Yeah, I know, but that's good.
But we cleaned off up to $4 million in the purge before.
And I'm not trying to tie up money because before we leave here today, I'm gonna ask for some respectable chunk of it.
Judge, you got thoughts? Anything you want to share?
Well, I asked the question before I do, is there a time frame where this encumbrance runs out?
Well, yes, I mean, all our economic development contracts, traditionally have run for between 3 and 5 years. With this one, you haven't signed the contract yet. I mean, my plan was to make this one, to give them 3 years from the starting day of production to fulfill these obligations.
So
I
that
think
would
we
be
would-
2026.
I think we would have to, or encumber the total number that's on the contract to keep us from having, because this court may turn over at some point, and you have new members that wouldn't know, and then you may get caught behind the 8 ball, having to find something that you didn't have the money for, so. I think it would have to be in its entirety. I don't know, it doesn't have to be that number of 225 people.
We have 2 of our Greta board members here with us, and glad to have you 2 guys. But there was some question about whether y'all had vetted this, or had you talked about this, or had been explained to this, and about it. And, did y'all have an opportunity to look at it and vote on it?
Yeah, so we've talked about it twice. The first time we talked about it, we didn't have a quorum, so we discussed it. And then we met this last month to discuss it. The Greta Board did approve incentives of $12,000 based on the guidelines that we've gotten from the Corn Court on how we are to vet projects. $225 job at $12,000, and that was approved by the Greta Board.
Did y'all, and just in general discussion, I'm not putting anybody on point, but did y'all have some of the same concerns or questions that you're hearing here?
We've had discussions with, and Cliff brought this up, on different ways to incentivize companies to not allocate so much money up front. But that was something that the board asked Cliff to go and do some research on and come back to us for. But we have discussed it, and Cliff said he would do the research on it. But that's the guidelines that we're working with now. But we do believe this is a good company that's there to do work for one of our large industrial customers. And then we need to incentivize that group to come in, because that is a customer of one of our largest employers in the county. So I don't think that this is a project that we don't want to incentivize.
Sister Jackson, you're awfully quiet. You're
I'm just-
dodging the bullet.
No,
back
I'm
there.
just not on the committee, I'm just listening.
No, please give us your input.
Well, I do think, I would love to see us incentivize every job that comes to Mississippi County, especially from Mississippi County residents, and even the boot heel. I'm in 100% agreement with that. On this particular project, I do think it is very ambitious to think that not only are they going to double the size of their company, they are, over the next 3 years, they're also going to employ, doing the same type of work, they're going to employ 3 to 4 times as many as any of those other companies do. At the $2.4 million, you're looking at almost an entire year worth of revenue from the economic development tax. I feel like that is a lot of money to tie up front. Not saying I don't want to do it. I mean, I will gladly give, I mean, like I said, every job they bring, I think it's awfully ambitious. I mean, we've heard lots of times, you know, and we have purged the books, and I guess that's something we could do in the taxes there. But it seems, like you said, I mean, it just seems a little strange to, if you know it's not coming to fruition, why would you ever, I mean, why are we doing that?
Well, the only reason, I mean, that figure, and I'm not, my concerns are the same as everyone's, but that figure came from them and was backed up by their site selected and by Nucor. So, but, you know, there is no, at this point, there is no contract. So if we wanted to do 100 jobs and set, then we can, I can send them that contract.
Here's the issue, so, I mean, and if they're forecasting 225, if that is a valid, educated forecast, I can get on board with that. But we know they are not going to employ 100% of that from
Right.
Mississippi County employees.
Right.
If they employed 70% of Mississippi County employees, which means 30% of these 225 jobs, we would never have to pay for it. That's $810,000. That's almost $1 million that we would have tied up that could have gone to another project
That's right.
that we're never gonna spend, but yet we've tied it up for 5 or 6 years.
Right.
You see, you know what I mean? Like, cause we were talking about if they've got 3 years from January 23, so that's 26 to get to that number. So I don't know if that would have to be paid out by the end of 26, or if we're looking into 27, as far as how long that money would be encumbered. That's just $1 million that's tied up for a very long time
Right.
that we're never gonna spend, and we may miss another project that's gonna come through that would be really great, that we can't spend that money on. That is my concern.
Right.
Well,
That is,
I understand what you're saying, but the truth of the matter is, and I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but the truth of the matter is, there's several $1 million sitting out there that's not committed. There's other money that is committed, that's never gonna be used. It's not like this is gonna take all of our money. Am I right in that?
We've never had a project come before the committee that we couldn't fund.
Right.
Not even 20 years of economic development tax, or 18 years. We've never had one, and if we got close, we can still purge. We can go back, if we have a project, if we get another $14.5 million Big River Steel come in and we need money, then we can always go back and repurge and see if we got, where we can find the money for the projects we need to. The other way is, so we got 2 ways. We can commit the whole thing, knowing that we're probably not gonna need that money, and if we need the money, we'll go back and purge the books of funds that we don't think, or we can drop down to, like she's saying, and drop 800,000 off, drop 30% off, and then drop 800,000 off, drop us down to 1.8 million from the 2.7, and move forward from there with the commitment that, this is where the judge's comment comes in, that if they come to need more, the court could come back and recommit more, if that court would follow through. So there's where the judge came from.
And then, you said 30, we could actually reduce it by 70%, something that's more realistic, because we're talking about in production 23, is that what you said?
Yeah.
We could revisit that and add some more jobs to it.
I mean, that's you're working two other projects right now, is that my understanding correct?
Yes.
And I mean, that's just a long time to type money that's never gonna be spent. It's just, again, because we know, and if they can find if they get 100% of 225 jobs in Mississippi County, the general fund ought to be doing pretty good by that point in time, because we're gonna have a lot of people living here that aren't living here now. I mean, because they're never gonna get 100% of that.
No.
Here, so I feel like we should, if we're gonna encumber money, we should do it based on realistic of what we actually think is going to spend, and we should not overshoot by $800,000. That's my opinion. And you're right, they can come back to the court at any point in time. And we can revisit, right?
That's correct, and which I certainly would love to come back to that table. if that-
And don't we do that with Newport?
Well, Nucor's it's under this same type of incentive. It's a performance-based
But
incentive.
each time they expand, what did we do last year? The 1.8, and then
We had about almost 3 million committed to the, which at present they've gone down approximately.
and so when they get down, then we'll,
If they add more.
if they add more, didn't we do that last year?
Well, year before.
Year before, okay.
But
Is
then
that
we've always
specific to
fully
construction
funded their
projects
initial
though,
request.
right? Is that specific to new construction projects, or just actually adding new?
Well, or expansion. Now, we don't, let's,
Well, and expansion, either way, it's still construction, because they gotta have, I guess, more facility to house those more new positions.
well, or, let's say they have been running at 200 and they say, well, we're gonna go to 300, but we can go to 300 in, San Antonio, or we can go to 300 in Lyle. Then that's a project.
I think the $1.8 million is much more realistic to what we're actually gonna get for over the course of the next 5 to 6 years.
How would the company feel about that? Is that gonna affect our credibility in the economic development?
No, I don't think that will. I think as long as we make it clear that we will honor that they understood, but it's really just a bookkeeping thing, but we don't want to do it. Because they're gonna come back, and we're gonna have more projects, hopefully, with Nucor. They're gonna put somebody next to these people.
Right, oh yeah, and if they make it that, I don't have a problem giving them $12,000 per job. That is just my concern is tying up the funds.
I've got a question. How do you come up with, is it always 12, or is it
No.
sometimes more?
We do it based on the wage. The top that we have done has been 18. I think maybe that's a little high. I believe I believe that really 15 should probably be the top. 12 would be, 15 would be an A, 12 would be a B. 10 would be a C, and below that, I don't know if you really need to incentivize it.
Justice Bird, you've gotten silent on this.
Well, I this is basically the same, scenario we've been through before.
Yes.
And like I said, sometimes the amount doesn't get met and it sits there and we go back, but we've never even been close to
No.
having to urge somebody to fund another one.
I would
And I
consider-
understand what you're saying, but, they don't, unless they produce the employee, they don't get the money.
Yeah, and so the money's not at risk.
The money's not risk, the money's in the bank drawing a little bit of interest. The bank
Not
pays
much.
these days.
Not much.
And we have had an announcement that other industries looking at us, that is very large.
The one thing that we don't wanna do, guys, and I mentioned credibility, is we don't want to affect our credibility.
No.
With other new industries potentially coming in, and we've initially said we'll do this, but now we're gonna back up and we're gonna do this
Well,
instead.
could we pass a resolution that it would be our intent to do this, 12,000 per job, for each Mississippi County resident, 6 for a Bluefield resident, and in, pursuit of that, we want to, at this time, fund, say, $1,500,000, of which 300 would be for the screen hire training program.
Well, I think we're looking at 1.8 million with
Okay.
300,000 being at that.
1.5.
So you have 1.5 for the jobs, and I think that is a realistic number of what we will ever spend. Like for this project, for
I don't
225
disagree.
jobs. We will not get 100%, the 70% is on the high end still.
So do you wanna make a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we move forward with the 1.8 million.
With 300,000 to
The
be for
300,000
ANC
to go for
workforce
the
training.
screen hire train, and 1.5 million to be, whatever appropriated for the jobs.
Do we wanna add anything in there that says our intent would be to move further along if more jobs, resident jobs were added?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the intent is to fund the expectation 225 jobs. We are just only appropriating the 1.8 million at this time.
Cliff, how's that?
I think that would be fine.
Judge?
I've got a question before we get there.
Yes, sir.
So that's a 1.5 for the employees.
For the jobs.
And what would be the time frame? I'm talking about a reasonable guess that 1.5 would be used up.
I
What
think
year?
we should go, well, 23, 24 by the end of 25.
See, I think we're still too heavy. We're talking about 2025. I mean, we could appropriate it. We've done the same thing with the resolution. I think we're probably twice too much right now.
At 1.5.
I mean, if we're not gonna use, I mean, the possibility is 4 years from now.
I guess my only reason for saying that is I agree with what Justice White is saying, is that we want people to feel like that we were willing to commitment. And I'm just using that figure because of the fact that based on other figures you've given me, that how much percentage those meals have come from Mississippi County employees.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think that that's a valid number. So, but I have no objections that you're saying actually lower the 1.8 million.
Well, I mean, we're
You have
saying
it.
for 4 years from now, that'll be tied up.
I got you.
When we could wait 3 years,
And fund it some more.
What about backing it up to the end of 24, too? That gives them 2 years. If they're gonna go in production in 23, they give them 2 years to put, how many is 1.5 million at 12,000, a little over 100 jobs,
125 jobs.
125 jobs.
That's reasonable.
And I think that is, so if you go with 125 jobs, that is still basically double anything out there that's doing the same type of work. If they're ever gonna get to the 225, then I think they'll be at 150 by the end of 24. I mean, that would seem to be reasonable to me. I mean, they're gonna have to hire, I mean, I would think you'd know by then.
So can we do that and put a timeline of the end of 2024 on it and still make them happy?
Well,
Be honest.
Which is better,
Well,
lower money and more time, or less time and more money?
well, I think they need 3 years. I mean, that's in the rule of the industry across localities, and 3 years to 5 years is what most people give a company to hire up. It took Denso 5 years to reach 500. And after year 1, we would have looked at those numbers and said, there's no way this will happen, because they were like 75. In year 2, they were only at like 140, and the plant manager was saying, I can't hire anybody in Osceola. And I was saying, you're not paying what you said you were going to. So then he started paying what he was going to, and they quickly came on to 500.
Alright, so, if they were at 40% of 225 jobs, you're looking at 90 jobs. So you're back down to a little over $1 million.
I think that's more reasonable, and then,
$1.3 million.
we're just talking about not tying the
We
money
do
up.
$1.3 million, so there's 300,000 for, the ANNEX, green hire and train, and then $1 million for the job, so a million, a flat million,
It'd be 83 jobs.
that's realistic. That's much more realistic, and that's at getting 100% of those 83 jobs.
Okay. So 1.3 million with 300,000 to ANC.
Yeah.
83, 84 jobs, give them 3 years, and then if we need to add more money, we can.
And then up to,
Up to the
up to the 225.
225.
I think that's much more realistic numbers.
And just as why you said, I don't think you, was aware in the announcement that, a possibility of 800 jobs coming here.
I've heard rumors,
Where are they?
I'm
going
kind
to
of
these people?
one of the little mice, I see no
But it's
evil
been-
here, no evil
I
speaking.
read it in 5 different publications.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I knew that there was a possibility.
I think I heard that somewhere.
Greta board members, what are y'all thinking about this discussion? Are y'all comfortable?
Yeah, I'll go back to, just it's been 10 years since we've been doing it this way based on, location in Mississippi County. I remember being on the board before that, and we gave the money up on the front end, and that was terrible. And, because you didn't have to prove the jobs, or if they did, getting money back from them was impossible to do. So I like our structure of having it where, they have to prove to us that they have the jobs. And I like the conservative approach of, making them prove that and then let them have the money. And, yes, it's sitting there in the, county funds, but it's earmarked and, they prove it on their part. But I do agree, 225 jobs, 100% of those are not going to Mississippi County. We don't know what the amount is, but I agree that it makes sense to free up some of those funds to lower the dollar amount and free up some of those funds for those 800 jobs that's coming here. But the mouse is still leaving out, so, but there is a lot of funds there and the taxes passed, so it's gonna be there for perpetuity for quite a while, so I don't think, you're gonna run out of money with it. What you already have there that's, not allocated and what's not, gonna be used for others, but I agree, the 225 jobs is most likely not gonna count for everybody.
Alright, so I just amend my motion to 1.3 million.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor. Justice McDonald, you kind of got caught up to speed, so you're on this committee.
Yeah, let's proceed.
So, we're,
Okay.
okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? We're moving.
Is this any risk of this jeopardizing the project at all?
No, I don't think so. I'll make it clear to them that we intend to follow through. This is just a bookkeeping.
Any other question? Motion on the floor, second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, then we're gonna adjust our, appropriation from 2.7 to 1.3, but we're gonna leave the 300,000 in, going to A and C. Tom, who's gonna do this, you or Kelly? Kelly, you taking care of those resolutions, or Tom, you taking care of those? You gonna take care of this with Jake? You've been taking care of the appropriation ordinances and have him redo the one that we had out there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
This doesn't have to go through finance, we'll go straight to court.
The finance had already approved it once.
That is true, we just changed the wording.
We just changed the wording in the amount. Quick,
Next.
next project.
Next, previously, I had been, told by members of this committee that in going forward into the solar field area, which we're about to enter, that as those are historically not connected with either the city of Osceola or the city of Loudon, that the court might like to issue those industrial revenue bonds themselves. Now we have two major projects that look like they're going forward in the county, one in Loudon, one in Osceola. They would each be around a $150 million investment
Apiece?
apiece. So if we get, and they're both asking for the 35%, the 65% property tax reduction through the ANNEX bonds. That is fairly common in Arkansas. White County just did one of equal size, and they gave the ANNEX bonds through the county. Actually, I think according to the law, although this would need to be checked, I think the county judge in this capacity is the county court can issue those bonds. I'm just asking for the wisdom.
So they're both gonna be outside the city limits of either one of those two counties, or cities?
Are these associated with any local concerns, or are they just merchant?
Well, they're merchant, but they both would be, well, I don't really know about the one up here. You say it's not associated with,
Not with co-op.
so the one I know is associated Well, maybe their final customer is not, but they would be going with the energy substation.
We've got Mayor Wilson from Osceola here today. Mayor Wilson, any input on the project down at Osceola now?
Not on this project, the solar project, the next one I will.
Okay, all right. Judge, what's your thoughts on us issuing bonds on these two projects and this 35%? Used to be Act 9 bonds, it's not Act 9 anymore.
I'd like to look into it a little bit more.
How much did you say, Cliff?
Well, what they're asking for is a 65% abatement, which is what the law allows.
But what's the estimate on the cost of the
It's kind of like a
project?
pilot project.
$150 million, so, and my belief is that if we don't give it to them, the Delta is a big place with lots of flat land, they'll go somewhere else.
I'm gonna take mine back, I understand now what we're talking about.
Yeah, okay.
We're talking about the abatement on, and that's it,
Right.
on the taxes.
Yes.
Or this, yeah.
Yes.
I have no problem with it.
The only thing the county has to gain is the 35%.
Right.
On the tax bill.
Right, if they go somewhere else,
The
we don't
schools
let.
get 80% of that.
Right. But, you know, I think over time, the steel mills will be interested in having a significant solar presence. They've made that clear that, you know, there's gonna be pressure from Washington to have a more clean, energy mix.
So, as a new court member, this is gonna be, I know that they've done that before, I don't know a whole lot about how the Act 9 bonds work, so what, other than us giving them a discount on their property tax, is that basically all we're talking about?
And if we don't, somebody else will.
And I
It's
don't know why you
competitive
wouldn't do
out
that,
there.
it's not gonna cost us anything, so, so is that all you need is a motion to approve that? Or where are you at on that?
Well, I just need to know if y'all will approve it,
Yeah.
and what's the sense of the court.
I don't think that's a no-brainer, or why we wouldn't do that.
If the judge has no problem with it.
I have no problem.
You know, when you look at what it would do for our schools, they would be taxed on $52.5 million, at the 35%. And then whatever the taxes were on that, schools get 80% of it, and our schools get it or somebody else. And that's times
52.5 million.
two.
Or get 52.5, where's that coming from?
That's 35% of 150 million. So they'd be taxed,
I got you, that's how the tax, okay.
yeah, they'd be taxed on 52.5 million.
I'm sorry, it's not a 65% off of what they actually owe. It's
And that's at
65%
each
off
end of the
that.
county.
Okay.
So I think it's a pretty good no-brainer there. And that's the judge is the one that'll actually do that in, his official class.
I'm sure everyone has seen the article, U.S. Steel's press release from last week. And I handed out the check and the letter from Mayor Wilson, just kind of is probably unneeded, but nevertheless appropriate, reminder of just what a project of this size is. This is the largest check ever written for property taxes in Mississippi County. It dwarfs what all the agricultural land in the county will bring in this year. It makes up almost 40% of all the property taxes in Mississippi County. And this is just on the original investment. It doesn't count the $1 billion they reinvested last year, or the $1 billion that Nucor invested in Bible last year. So that will be another check of approximately this size. And then as you read the article, you see that they are talking about a expansion that would, $3 billion, which would be almost twice what this represents. So obviously that's not a project we want to lose. We've been working on it now for several months. Mayor Wilson and myself and the people at AEDC I haven't put together a project incentive package. The state is still working, and I talked to them this morning, and as soon as they put together their package together, it will give me guidance for what would be appropriate at our level. I'm not gonna ask for anything today because I don't have a project package to bring before you.
So the last time, wasn't it 125 from the state, 14.5 from us?
Yes.
Do you anticipate something of that nature again?
Well, again, as I talked to several of you individually, I want to see if perhaps we can craft a package that would probably be less investment on our part overall, but come up front. We know when Big River Steel employ about 40% of their people live in Mississippi. Most of their management live either in Osceola or Manila. That's still continuing. I mean, they had, I met a management person 2 weeks ago that had just, he'd been driving from Alamo, Tennessee for 5 years, 2 hours going, 2 hours back. But his children graduated from high school and moved to Osceola. I asked him, how do you like Osceola? He says, well, there wasn't anything to do in Alamo either. But we drove to Memphis and we wanted to have dinner, and we still do. So, but I would like to see if that would help, because very often, in a project, even the numbers here are huge, and our investment will be small, but still, something on the beginning is often much more assistance to the people trying to craft the original investment than something later on, which, as we've obviously just demonstrated here, simply becomes a bookkeeping difficulty in the later years. I would like to couple that with a healthy screen hire train program. And then, as I've talked to several of you about a possible housing incentive, I think that's something I would like to do. All of our projects until we see how it's working. Is that, you know, and what I've discussed there is that, say, a $30,000 incentive that people could use to purchase a home, whether new construction or an existing home. The money would run through the company because it is in the company's interest that they have people who live near their plants. In the long run, even the ones who don't live here very much know that they can't have a stable, healthy, safe plant if there's no management within an hour of the plant. Somebody's got to watch the store. And especially in the smaller companies, very often the owners want to watch this. It may, you know, as other things we've tried, it may work beyond our wildest imaginations, it may not work at all. But if the company is willing to take a 4 or 5 year second lien on the property and not permit the home to be sold for that period of time, then our goal is not to become the house flipping capital of Arkansas, it's to have people live in the Bible, Osceola, Manila, Wilson, wherever areas. And if anybody really is against that, I'd like, let me know, because, you know, I'm going to craft this into the proposal if not.
Judge, comments?
I think we need to be very aggressive with this project and not get caught asleep at the wheel and do what is necessary to make sure we land this company and it arrives here in home, Mississippi County, and that we're a good partner.
Mayor Wilson, is this the project you wanted to talk about?
This is the project, and I wanna thank this court for the help with the project years back, which this is Mayor Kenmore's project, and so, and Cliff said, 125 million from the state and 14 million from the county, we thank you very much for that. I do wanna, please always remember that there was also a $2 million incentive, a $2 million gift from the city of Osceola.
There was.
Also got, so it was $141 million, in that project, so. And as this project goes along, as you can see, we're looking for state incentives, come to you again for incentives, and they'll come back to Osceola as well for an incentive. I do agree completely with Cliff and the idea of doing something that's really gonna incentivize people to live in the county. We know we removed the sales tax, and we heard people say this over and over again, so I think we're right in the right place with this. You see the check there, we included the letter, because I did want you to know that letter we did endorse. I've never endorsed a $5 million check before I put my signature on the back. But we're really happy to partner with the county in this. And you're right, this is, tell me the amount that the county got to keep out of that check. And by the way, Osceola kept nothing out of the check. It all went was forwarded. I don't know the county's amount. What was it?
I think it's 13% goes into the general fund.
Closer to 10% of the taxes collected, so they'll be taxed on 52.5 million. Oh, no,
No,
this,
she's talking about
this
the $9
project,
million.
oh, and this project, gosh, the county gets about 10%, roughly, and the schools get 80%.
So I think it's a beauty to this. So this is money that comes back every year.
Every
to
year.
the county, to the county general fund.
And it's been steady going up.
Yes.
And regardless of the money the county gets, the county government, the county, this infuses the entire county.
Oh, it does.
Well, this is what's making this Neil Bird's opinion. This is what's making the difference in whether Mississippi County is in a strong financial position compared to most other Delta counties is because of our industrial base. We've lost 10,000 people in 10 years, and we're in the best financial shape we've been in probably in 20 or 30 years. But it's because of this return on our industrial stuff.
I was on this phone for 25 years ago as well as Justice White, and I'm sure you that we can both back that up. That we know where our position is and how we got there.
Well, and if the school systems are getting 80% of that, does that divide out by does that all go to the South County because of where it's at? Is that location based? So you're gonna have to have some incentives to get some people living here, because the schools are gonna need students. They got money they got to spend, and they're gonna need students. They're gonna need people living
I
here.
believe the correction with that, I think it all goes to the state, and the state divvies it out.
Okay,
what it
based
does?
on
Yeah,
it, and it's probably the population base probably, or what is it?
I think it's the foundation aid. It doesn't come right back to our schools. It's split out across the state.
And they could end up having to send money to the state.
If that's exactly my point, is that I know that happens, that they have to turn
That's
those,
what Honorable does.
yes.
Right.
That's my point, is that they need people living there, they need new students, they need kids, and
So, yeah, armor.
or we give it all back to the state. Well, I think that's awesome.
Cliff, my concern is this, is that when we bring a lot of companies in, you talked about having and we've spoken about this as well, in the management, and I don't know how it can happen as having those lived. What about, is there any way or any type to incentivize to hire more local people to be in management positions here? Is that?
Well, we have the incentive to hire local. We have all the training the company need to train local. And then if we start adding a housing, lure to our fishing tackle, we'll have reason for them to buy a home. Okay, as far as local people rising in the company, that's gonna fall on the person. I mean, they have to.
But now, I'm not talking about rising to the company, I'm talking about people who actually 50 years old, have developed places, want to come back home,
Right.
have the experience, professionalism, the experience to be in management. And what about those?
Well, I haven't spoken to many industry people about the housing thing. But I would think if we opened that up to people they might hire that are from Mississippi County and would like to come home, that might be all it took to get them.
I think that's certainly worth looking into. One thing I wanted to ask, when you were talking about your housing incentive, have you talked with local realtors, I mean, to see?
Yes, I talked to, goodness, the mortgage
Dana also.
Dana and I spent about an hour and a half, and she gave me the figures for new construction versus what homes were selling for. Obviously, in Manila, homes are selling for new construction. In Blyville, homes are selling for a little less than new construction. And in Osceola, it's a little less than that, but they've all been rising, both Osceola and Blyville, and everywhere else has been rising. That's how I came up with the 30. I think for a $250,000 home, which is, kind of in the upper average, that would be enough to erase any doubt they might have of, well, if I buy a house there and I get transferred in 5 years or 6 years, will I be able to get my money back for it? And that ought to be enough to answer that question positively. This came, I think y'all will remember when we offered the brother and sister from Chicago $100,000 each if they would live in Mississippi County.
I think it's a tremendous idea. I really like it a lot. I think one thing that we just need to think about just a little bit is if you're planning on moving to a place, how many people would really say, okay, most of the time they don't really have that much notice, so they're gonna say, oh, we're gonna move there in a couple of months, but we're gonna build a house that's gonna take a year.
You're talking about home availability. And that, as he talked to the realtors about home availability.
It's a great idea. I wish, but how, again, just, is that a thought to think if I'm going into upper management, my hope is that I would probably be here, then I may be somewhere else. So am I really gonna spend all that time building a house? Wouldn't I just rather buy one?
Well, it would certainly help with existing housing. And to that extent, to the extent that more people come to Blyville and buy a house, instead of going to Dyersburg to buy a house, it will increase the home value of everyone in Blyville. And the same for Manila and Osceola.
How many of these do you think that you would see per package, like 4 or 5 housing?
Yeah, 3 to 5.
So you might, if nothing else, but it might get the ear of a local builder who might actually build. If they realize that there's gonna be some money out there for these companies and these companies are coming and there's 800 jobs, then there may be some development.
Stick 'em.
Yeah, that, you'll have builders come in and say, okay, we're gonna develop some housing here. Sure, and that so changes. I can only speak to the Blyville market because that's the one that I'm so familiar with and do a lot of research on real estate. Right now, the inventory is low. It's very low. Because I almost just flipped 2 houses until I ran the capital gains taxes and decided around. But it's very low because there's not enough on the market. But that changes so much because, 3 years ago, that was not the case. There was, you had people who could not sell their houses that were begging to try to, sell them. So that's so changing. But I think that is key to be able to get some housing and some developers, if they know, hey, there's gonna be some higher end people that got some money and I'm gonna be able to sell these houses, I think you'll see some new construction.
Well, if a project of this size, if we work fortunate enough to get that, it's almost gonna require someone to come in and develop a subdivision or 2 or 3 subdivisions or something. We don't have the housing, people like that, and they need, it's gonna require something like that. And the problem, one of the problems around here is
They're listening, they're starting with construction as we speak.
well, one of the problems around here is that getting land, no one wants to sell their land. That's always been a problem in the time I've been here, as far as housing development and so forth. No one wants to sell their land.
Right, and that's you said a $250,000 home. How many do you think's available in Blyville at the moment? I wouldn't think.
But of course, I'm gonna add something to it just as far as, no one wants to sell their land until it gets to be a certain price.
Right.
It
will make a difference.
It always makes.
Our banker like that back there with Majestic Steel.
And literally during this meeting, been texting a guy that's a manager for River Steel. He lived in Manila, grew up in the Manila area, has lived in Heber Springs for the last 20 years because they didn't live here. The last 300 days, he's been commuting back and forth to Osceola, and he just, has gotten approved to buy a small house in Wilson to get his wife to come here, and they're buying a lot and will start construction in Wilson to build a house for $225,000. I told him, hold on, there might be $30,000 coming. The need is there, and he said, I've convinced my wife to move back there, so that's, they've been gone for 20 years.
And I think new construction, not only helps them to live here, but I think new construction and things like that going on is what people need to see, that things are happening and we should move back here. So I think that's right on target for us to consider.
Well, that's what brings your restaurants and
Right.
entertainment.
Yeah, they gotta have those counts.
And Fox Crossing was sold 5 lots this year, that's the most left on that's been out there. And I think 2 more of the contractors, so there is some housing starts going on.
Well, there's actually a couple out on the highway too, three
Yeah.
gonna build up.
What do you need from this committee?
Well, I appreciate what I've gotten. I mean, I appreciate everybody's input, and I will put together, you know, I don't think our incentive will be required, you know, by the end of this month. And if it is, we can have an emergency meeting.
If the article I saw, referred to this and said it was down to two states,
Yes.
Arkansas and, was it Alabama?
Alabama. Traditional.
Are we the location in Arkansas or are there other locations?
Can I ask you a question? So, again, I'm a new court member, just curious, and I'm not saying that I'm not interested in steel projects, but is there any way, I know you're under a lot of non-disclosure agreements, I get that, but is there any way when we do look at packages, we can have just a little bit more information just based on like a general business profile of the company? Because I really was under the impression that this new company, that Company A, was not a steel-related industry.
Really?
Now, I'm not saying I would have voted differently had I known that, but it would be nice if we were able to at least say, okay, this company has 6 facilities across the country and they employ X number of employees, and it just has some sort of basic information. I would appreciate that if that's possible.
It's possible. I kind of fell into a trap of, on the non-disclosure agreement. I should have insisted going forward that I have the ability to tell not who the company was, but what they did, and that they, now as far as the financing of anyone outside of like very small businesses like Mr. Pickle, we depend utterly on AEDC to vet the company financially. And so when I say that I will look at their incentive package and make ours appropriate, that's an appropriate amount of risk that AEDC is willing to take. And obviously, with the first Big River Steel package, the state of Arkansas took more risk than they ever had, and so did Mississippi County. But it worked out for both of us. I mean, in addition to the $125 million, the state loaned them $50 million, and they paid that back. They paid it back 15 years early. So.
Well, it was a very good example, just because like when the Majestic Steel, when you do research them and they've got 60 employees at all their different plants,
Right.
then it was hard to justify and say, well, I have no idea why we just voted to give them 225 jobs. You know what I mean? Like, so just having a little bit more information to say, this is what they have, but they expect this to be 3 times the size. So I could justify that a little bit better when that comes out.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so, we're moving forward. We're also working, a truck assembly plant that has looked in Osceola. They looked in Manila. We showed them, they were looking for an existing building. We showed them, Fruit of the Loom, and we showed them the federal mobile building. They focused on Fruit of the Loom, somewhat to my surprise. Federal mobile is newer, not as quite as big, but it's really tall. I mean, it's got 27-foot beam heights, and the primary building is 1,000 feet long, so it'd be almost perfect for assembly line construction. But they weren't interested, so they're interested in Fruit of the Loom. I don't know much about the company yet. I mean, they have a website. It's, EVTV. Their market niche is last mile delivery. So their customers would be FedEx, Post Office, UPS, and obviously the white whale would be Amazon. Places where they can, because as much as the vehicles are part of their product, the charging stations are equal. They're partners with lithium battery makers from Taiwan who are interested in moving their plant to Arkansas. Because Mr. Xi is not going to invade Arkansas, but Taiwan is a different subject matter, so at least we hope he's not going to invade Arkansas. So the battery maker alone needs 200,000 square feet. The building has 500,000. Mayor Wilson and her staff have been extremely helpful. They've helped us locate a company that will do a survey of the building, because the building has not been in active use since the 90s, although people have stored a great deal of inventory in there from Benzo and other manufacturers in the Osceola area. Of course, Big River Steel used the offices for 2 years while they were building their plant. And so I may come back and ask for, once I get a figure on what that survey would cost and have a little more time to ascertain both the seriousness of the company and the seriousness of their effort to come to Mississippi County. It might be worth the survey, depending on the cost and other things like that. Because it's interesting. I mean, it's really all designed, if you plug up 50 trucks at night or 500 trucks at night, but it works great for one car. Just plug it into your house, into the socket. But if you get 50 or more, the grid starts doing that, unless you have a transformer like Nucor or Big River Steel. So they charge out of these battery packs that they bury, and then when the trucks are out, the batteries refill themselves off the grid, and then because the battery will just come down even. So that's a big project. I mean, the beginning numbers are 1,000 people, you know, and on the subject of labor and everything, and this is just my personal opinion. I think we're at that inflection point where something's going to give. The companies are going to have to partner with us to bring people to Mississippi County, much like the companies did almost 25 years ago in Northwest Arkansas, when they realized we don't have enough people. We can't keep Tyson going because the people that traditionally work, and you know, someone who gutted chickens at Tyson made as much as a diesel mechanic in Rob. A trained, skilled diesel mechanic made about what a person on the rendering line made at Tyson Foods. So they paid them well, but it's a terrible job. And finally, people got enough better jobs, they didn't have to do it. If Tyson had made widgets, they would have moved to Mexico or China, but they made chickens. So they had to go get the people. And of course, they went first, they had a mishap. The people didn't have all the papers they needed, but then they worked that out. And now they brought Hispanics in from Texas, and that didn't, I mean, that was wonderful for Northwest Arkansas. It didn't solve Tyson's problem because they didn't like gutting chickens either. So they opened restaurants and beauty salons, and now their children are opening law firms and CPA firms and are executives at Tyson and Walmart. And so they had to go get the Marshallese. I think that's where we are. I mean, I talked to Dr. Shimwell as soon as we were going to have already done it. COVID resurfaced, but I'm gonna see if we can, with the cooperation of the court and the college, create a Mississippi County Industrial Council where they understand clearly that they can't, it's no longer just saying, y'all need to. Because any sentence that begins that way is not going anywhere. I mean, we all know what's needed, and they know what's needed too, but they're going to have to accept that and accept their part of the responsibility. for making that happen, whether it's building worker housing, cooperating with us in some manner to get that going. I mean, because I don't see any end to job increase here.
But don't you think that the word will get out, just like when there's construction? These people just show up with RVs out of nowhere because they know there's construction work. So
That's
don't you
right.
think though that if the word gets out that we have all these jobs and they are coming, that some of those
Well,
people will start to
people
come?
will come. But I think if we can have a cooperative effort where the companies know that, yes, we do understand that right now you're just having to bid your people away from somebody else. That's what'll happen with Majestic. I mean, from day one, they'll be in a war. If the pipe mills are up and operating, they'll be in a war. If the pipe mills are down, they'll just hire those people. Then when the pipe mills start back up, which they probably will, then they'll start bidding against each other. But I mean, I agree. I think the market has always solved this problem for everyone. There weren't 4 million people in Pittsburgh when Andrew Carnegie opened his first steel mill, but they came.
You mentioned talking to Dr. Shimwell about the training programs, and I think we had this discussion as well. Will you guys begin to talk to the superintendents at our high schools, basically because I think we can start gearing our high schools up in some particular way to help train these individuals. Basically, by the time you get to think about going to college, army, or nothing.
The ANC has several programs like that right now, and I know that because I print for a lot of them.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of, where they bring all the different schools.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, Michelle, Michelle Bennett is over out there at ANC, is working with the high school, so they are doing a considerable amount of that and recruiting early on. I don't know exactly what it starts at junior level, senior level, or if it starts at sophomore, but I know that they are bringing in buses of those kids in every year.
Yes, well, he does. He keeps, several years ago, in effort to start a program where the students would come in the afternoon and start taking basic electricity, some mechanical science. Dr. Shimwell actually got all 7 school districts in Mississippi County to adopt the same school calendar. And I told him when he got that done, his next stop should be Jerusalem. Do case in the Middle East. I mean, it was literally an epic task, but yes. The last thing, the Great River Board met in formal session with a quorum and did vote that the National Cold War Museum, being a vetted tourism project, in their belief, did qualify as economic development. And in this belief, they're no different than the state of Arkansas, which recognizes tourism as Arkansas' second largest industry, and therefore they voted a recommendation to this committee to make a $500,000 grant to the Arkansas Rail Tax to replace or stabilize the roof on the Lord facility. And Mr. Vice Chairman, would you like to add to that?
I think the key word in that project was vetted. I think that we've seen the feasibility studies, the state has put in their portion of it. Our state and federal legislative bodies have went in and worked to get it certified through their means. So I think the key word of the whole thing is vetted. From everything we've seen, feasibility studies, the things that we've witnessed through the federal government and their studies and what they've asked for, the tourism feasibility study, what they've seen up in the nuclear silos. I think that this project has been vetted, and the state has put in, if I'm correct, $500,000, and we're matching that to help stabilize the roof so we can move forward with that project. So that was our response on that. Anything else, the mayor, you would add?
That diversifies outside the steel industry.
So we actually already moved this out of committee, but we didn't move it out of, it went through to the court, but it was going through the court as coming out of the general budget, so we need to put it back. So I make a motion that we move forward with giving the $500,000 to the National Code War per their recommendation.
Out of economic
Out of
development.
out of this committee, out of economic development.
I'll second.
Judge, discussion, sir?
No, I have no. I think it's a good project. I think it's, I don't think it's,
No, that's fine.
very good project.
Ms. Molly, anything, ma'am?
You know, I'm a believer in tourism, so, like, I can give a couple of numbers. Again, you know, we have 3 great exits in Mississippi County that see a tremendous amount of traffic. Again, I know you guys hear me say this a lot. Our Welcome Center out here under the management of Sheila Ward is on track to see the most visitors of any Welcome Center in the state this year. They'll see over 120,000 visitors. So as the feasibility studies have shown, we have the people driving by. We just have to have something,
When we
to
come
look
see.
at for them to come see.
Pull them into town
And all of the, you know, market research is showing that that's how people are traveling. They're traveling domestically right now. We'll continue to do that for probably the next 5 to 6 years, because of COVID. Seeing multi-destination stops, as you and I talked about a little bit on your last vacation.
exactly.
So I think it's a good project.
Justice McDonald?
I think it's really a wonderful project, and I'm all for tourism and the increase of revenue to the county. I think it will be, along with the other, I'm gonna say, assets that we have, like the Cold War Museum, like the Johnny Cash, we could do a wonderful county package that would include the Cold War Museum. One of the pluses that we have is that runway, the air base. I think it's 1 of 3 with the length of that runway in the country. So I think we need to display our gems. And so if that would help to bring revenue, increase jobs, increase education, I'm all for it. One thing, Justice Jackson said, if you have not been to the rest stop out there, you need to go. I mean, that place is just full of just actually, I went in there the other day and had been in there in a while, of actually pamphlets, directions. I was in there and the guy actually was coming from up north going to Florida. He asked about the base.
Really?
He asked.
I tell people all the time,
Yeah.
it is
It's-
still,
yeah.
I mean, it's probably, I mean, it's by far the number one question. I mean, people ask a lot about agriculture, especially cotton, you know, once they've defoliated, but by far the base is still the number one question.
I think there's a pretty high percentage of the retired travelers now that spend a couple of years out here. It's
Or
really,
have
really high
somebody,
percentage.
you know, an uncle or
Yeah,
a
somebody
dad, you know,
Has
somewhere,
come to that.
yes. I mean, it really is shocking, more than you would, I mean, more than you can imagine.
I did run into, our representative Johnny Wright yesterday, was made aware of this project, and he told me that he was now on the tourism committee for the state, and he requested a tour of the,
Facility?
Yeah.
So Cliff, if we vote on this, the full court votes up, where's the money go? Who do we write the check to?
To the Arkansas Airways.
Arkansas Airways.
Or actually, the Bible guys will reach there.
I just think we need that identified.
Okay.
BGRA.
I think that the alert, they actually, the BGRA actually owns the facility.
That is
It's all
correct.
there, it would be correct.
Code Museum Commission.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor with the second, guys, that we appropriate $500,000, for the National Cold War Museum out of Economic Development Fund. Is there further discussion? Somebody,
Like we heard, the names, those boys.
Code War Museum Commission.
Cold War Museum Commission.
Yeah, they're all.
Yeah, they're all signed.
Don't take that in the other things.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? We'll send this to the full court next Tuesday night. Mr. Chipwood, anything else, sir?
Thank everyone for their patience
Yeah, very good.
and advice.
Judge, anything else, sir?
I think we've had a good meeting. I think we've got a lot of really good things on the horizon. I think we need to get to work and make sure we get them all here.
We appreciate Mary Wilson coming today and also our GRES board members along with Jamaica and our elected officials. So thank y'all very much. We'll call the meeting adjourned.
The state started that initiative with Parks and Tourism to rebuild all of the road research across the state.